Tejas from Aussies Group New Zealand. I thank you first and all for the tremendous response that we have for the Canadian Pathway to Residency program. And we also apologize that many of you were thinking that it will be a live session that will be conducted at our office and came to our office. But actually it was a live session that we were conducting. So this Pathway to Residency to Canada will cover the overview of the Canadian Residency program, which is the express entry through which people generally go for federal skilled worker, then federal trade skill program, as well as the PNP program. Now at the start, I want to clarify that we will not be covering the PNP program because it is a bit complicated and it will be covered in the future videos. And today we'll be focusing mainly on the overview, the basic requirements that are needed for the Canadian Pathway to Residency, the express entry system. So if you look at the express entry system, it has been designed in a step-by-step procedure that you have to follow when you are applying for a Pathway to Residency program in Canada. The first step to go for the residency is to understand that you have to enter yourself into the job pool and open your profile on the Canadian Immigration website. For the Canadian Immigration website, the basic requirements that you generally need are your skills, your education, your language ability, the work experience, and some other details. But when you are creating the profile, make sure that you have a valid IELTS score, because I want to clarify here that only IELTS is accepted in Canada, as we are in New Zealand right now and we cannot go for CEFL. So IELTS score which is valid is mandatory. Now, if you have done your bachelor's, it is generally suggested that you should have an IELTS score within the range of 6 or 6.5, because when you fill your IELTS score in the profile, it is generally you have to fill each module like reading, listening, writing, and speaking. So you have to fill the details for each module. So that is why a valid IELTS score will be required, or you will not be able to create your profile on the Canadian Immigration website. If you are already married, then you will also require a valid score for your spouse. So you need a valid IELTS score for your spouse as well, with all the details and the validity date. When you create this profile on the Canadian Immigration website, you generally start the process for the Canadian Express entry. This profile is valid for 12 months. When you have created this profile, you also get an opportunity to see jobs on the Job Bank, which is a portal created by the Canadian Immigration website, in which you can see for jobs which are related to the occupation. So if you have got a job on the job portal, you should have a profile at the start, and then you can apply for the job that you are looking for on the Job Bank. The second step is that generally when you have completed your profile on the job pool, that is the Canadian Immigration website, Canadian Immigration sends you a detailed form asking for more details about the skills, education, IELTS score, and work experience that you have mentioned in your applications. Now there is an overlapping point system for Canadian Immigration, that is the express entry system, and we will cover this point system in detail in our future videos related to Canadian Pathway to Residence. This is just the first video that we are starting with for the Pathway to Residency program in Canada, and our goal is to give you an overview of what is needed at the start. So when you're starting this process, you have to create your profile on the Canadian job pool on the Canadian Immigration website. When you have created this job profile, you have to nominate your occupation, which comes in the nomination occupation list in Canada, which is called NOC. And as you might be aware that each job has its own classification. So the classification works in this way, like if you are applying for a managerial job, it will generally fall into the NOC skill level O or 0. Or if you are applying for a professional job which is in marketing or any other related activity, it generally falls into the skill category of NOC, which is skill level A. And if you are applying for a trade skilled occupation, you will find that occupation on the NOC skill level C. So you have to choose this occupation, which is very important, because any occupation that you are thinking of applying to Canada, it should be mentioned in the national occupation list of Canada. If the work occupation is not mentioned on the list, unfortunately, you will not be able to apply for an express entry system. Now we have got a lot of queries asking that they have got a sponsor from Canada or they have a job offer letter from Canada. Yes, that will help you to gain more points for your express entry system. But when you have a job letter, offer letter from Canada, you should also have an LMIA, which is a labor market testing. And in that labor market testing, it should be clearly mentioned by the employer that no Canadian worker was available to perform that job and all the valid reasons of choosing you for the required job. If you are going through the LMIA, generally in an LMIA, you have to give your job offer letter, you have to give your contract, you have to give a copy of the LMIA and the LMIA number as well. So this is the format of LMIA if you have a job offer already from Canada. Regarding the work experience, there is no mandatory work experience that is required, but generally it is told that whenever you choose an occupation, you should have at least 1 year experience related to that occupation in the past 10 years. And you should have all the documentation ready so that you can verify that work experience. Regarding the English language, there are 2 national languages for Canada, that is English and French. So if you have scores in IELTS in English, it is very good. And if you have given your French language basic language requirement, so you will get more points in your express entry profile. When you create this profile on the Canadian immigration website, you are generally opening yourself into the express entry pool, and you, based on the experience and the educational qualification that you have provided, you may be given an invitation within 90 days after creating the profile. When you get an invitation, generally 99.9% of the time what we have seen is that the documentation are asked only on the discretion of the visa officer. So it is not mandatory that the documentation will be asked. But when you have the detailed form, you have to upload the supporting documentation for the skilled experience or the education that you have mentioned on your profile. Now it is not mandatory to apply for the residence straight away because your profile will be valid for 12 months. Remember that your profile is very important because you get the GC key as well as the UIC number, which will be valid with you until you get the residence for Canada. Now generally when you get the residence to Canada, there will be a clause that you have to settle outside the territory of Quebec for a limited or on the discretion of the visa officer, whatever is given when you get the residency of Canada. Now we have got a lot of people asking for trade occupations. The trade occupations will generally require a skill assessment from the Canadian authorities, as we have seen about chefs, truck drivers, etc. And also if you have a qualification from countries like India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, on which you are assessing or creating your profile, generally you will have to do an educational qualification assessment, which is from Canada and which will be mandatory when you fill the detailed form. So when you fill that, when you are given that detailed form, it is generally very good to go for the ECA if you are providing a foreign skill level qualification. Now about the minimum requirements, I'll check all the factors relating to the minimum requirements. Like when you say skilled work experience, many of the people don't understand what is the meaning of skilled work experience. It is the same type of job as your primary NOC, like whatever occupation you have chosen, it should be in the national occupation list, and it should be the work experience that you have while you have chosen to put that as a skilled work experience in your profile. And it should be within the last 10 years. So you can't have a huge gap, like you have this only 1 year of experience in the past 20 years, it will not be counted. Also, it should be a paid work, voluntary work or unpaid internships are generally not counted by the Canadian immigration. It is only the paid work. And there is also a classification of what is the skilled work experience in terms of the duration and the specification of the job. Like when you say you have at least 1 year of experience, it amounts to 1,560 hours total or 30 hours per week, and it should be a continuous employment. There cannot be a break in an employment when you are giving at least 1 year of work experience. Also, it should be a permanent full-time job where it amounts to 30 hours per week for 12 months. So it should be a continuous employment where you are doing 30 hours per week, and it should be going on for 12 months. If you are showing part-time experience, generally it should be 15 hours per week, and it should be continuous for about 24 months. But when you show the part-time work experience of about continuous work experience of 2 years, generally it will be counted as 1 year of full-time work experience. If you have done a full-time work experience at more than one job, then also you will need to show the document stating that you have had a full-time job where you were doing the job for 30 hours per week for 12 months, and it was for more than one job. So 6 months you were working for some company, you were working full-time for 30 hours per week for 6 months, as well as for the other company. There was no gap. You directly joined the job and it was again for 30 hours per week for the last 6 months. Now, language ability, you should give an IELTS, which is very important, and you should get a minimum score, that is a Canadian language benchmark it is called. It is compared with the IELTS score, and that CLB benchmark is 7 in all 4 abilities. And you should include the latest test results when you create that profile on the Express Entry or the Canadian Immigration website. Don't put a date that is not valid, because it will generally contradict your profile when you have to support your documentation. In terms of education, yes, you need to complete at least a secondary high school according to the Canadian standards. So you may have a certificate, diploma or degree, but you should get it assessed from the Educational Credential Assessment Body of Canada. Right? For the selection factors, the main factors that will help your application are the age, education, work experience. If you have a valid job offer, you will get more points. Your English language ability and the adaptability, because sometimes they may ask of proof of funds if you don't have a job offer letter. You can select from 4 options, that is 12,500 Canadian dollars per year to support yourself, then 25,000 Canadian dollars, or you may go for 45,000 or 35,000 Canadian dollars as well. But that should be shown, because you don't have an offer letter in Canada and still you have been invited for the residence. Now, when you are giving all the selection factors of age, education, work experience, English language, and the ability, like the proof of funds, you should generally see to it that your total points are passing the 67 points mark out of the 100 points which are used to assess the federal skilled workers pathway. So if you are applying for FSW, which most of us are eligible for, you should have points that are above 67, and you may be eligible to go ahead and apply for the federal skilled worker pathway. If you are the principal applicant, then most of the points are according to the documentation that you are providing. You will get the major points for that. But also remember that your spouse can help you a lot when she has given her IELTS. If she has skilled work experience and a qualification, she can add on to your points, and it is always mandatory when you create that profile that you and your spouse have a valid IELTS score. So this is just the first part. When you complete this step, you are entering yourself into the job pool and you are opening yourself to the job bank. When you complete this first part, you may or may not get that invitation, but you will come to know clearly about the eligibility of yourself when you are going into the Express Entry program. In this live session, our main motive was to cover this first step, because we have to cover each step in detail, and we will be also giving you knowledge about the federal skill program in detail, non-provincial Pravedi program in detail, as well as federal trade skill program in detail in the future videos. So if you have enjoyed this video, we like to have you, if you have any queries, you can call us on 0800 287 749. We'll be very happy to entertain all the inquiries regarding Canadian immigration. And we also hope that you join us for the future videos, which will cover in detail all the programs, and hope that you have understood the basics of applying for the Canadian Express Entry program. Thank you.